back to the Remote No Pressure Bobcast. Bobcast. It's like a bobcat.
Right out of the gate, we're doing great.
It's like a bobcat with an S.
Bobcast.
Welcome to the Bobcast. I was actually reading an article about podcasting this week, and it was talking about the reason it's called a podcast is because originally it was made for an iPod.
What is that?
And it was saying that a lot.
Is that like a Zune?
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like a Zune with a speed dial on it.
Oh, nice.
You know, a Zune.
The old rotary phones.
Oh my gosh, a Zune. I haven't heard that word in a long time. But it was arguing that eventually people will think iPods were made for podcasts.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt that, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Even though the iPod was first.
Yep.
People who weren't around in that time will think, oh, well, an iPod was made for podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, podcasting's up, like, over 20% over the last year.
Is
up?
Downloads?
Yeah.
No kidding.
It's crazy. And I heard, several times, because I drive in the car. I'm in sales, so I'm in the car a lot.
Uh-huh.
And I do listen to Rush Limbaugh occasionally.
What?
I know. I listen to Rush Limbaugh. It's very entertaining. and he's talent on loan from God. It's what he tells everybody. But anyways, so I listened to him the other day, and he was all ticked off about podcasters. And he's like, podcasting only, basically the liberal, knotheads are the only ones downloading podcasts. This thing is, there's not a lot of people listening to podcasts and blah, blah, blah. And I can tell that whenever, he's like defensive about it.
Uh-huh.
Because before, there was all these gatekeepers. Like you had to work your way up through a radio station and maybe get considered for a show. Mm-hmm. And then you also have FCC and other government regulations that have owned the airwaves for so many years. Yep. And now it's just, it's a wide open door.
Same thing with YouTube. It gives everybody the voice now, or just to a smaller extent, Facebook, where people go on their rants.
Right. And by the way, speaking of YouTube, go check out our YouTube channel.
Yes.
Subscribe.
Yep. Subscribe. Share with your friends. Everything we've ever done. Everything we've ever done is posted. Yes.
That's awesome, Bill. You did a great job with that.
Thank you.
Really, you are responsible for the YouTube channel.
Well, you did the interviews.
Yeah, but it's still, So thank you very much for doing that, Bill.
Yeah.
But so you're right. So now the walls have come down, and anyone, it's really the market that decides if it's good enough or not.
That's right.
It's not the guy asking for sexual favors, #MeToo, I can get you on the radio kind of thing. If you're awesome and you can get out there.
Wait a minute. Never mind. So when I signed up, no.
You weren't supposed to tell anybody, Bill. Wait a minute. Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. Yes. No, you were not required to. I digress. So, anyways, so that time has passed. So it's really cool that people can create their own content, and if it's good, people will listen and people will watch. If it's bad, people won't listen and people won't watch.
I was just listening to a podcast on the way over here. They only do it once a month. It's on hammock camping.
Okay.
And their audio quality isn't that great.
Uh-huh.
They did a phone-in interview too, and it was they didn't put much effort into it. But they still have a ton of listeners because they have the market for it. There's not many podcasts on hammock camping.
Right. No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Well, you ever been to Chicago, Bill? You've been to Chicago several times.
A time or two, yeah.
You're from the Midwest.
Yeah.
It seems like everyone, either middle school or whatever, you take a field trip there. But probably not you from Cadillac.
Yeah. Well, Cadillac area.
You guys probably went to Marquette. Let's go to the big city of
Actually,
Marquette.
Mackinac Island. That was our big thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Mackinac Island. Yeah, my kid went there a couple years back or last summer, and great place to go. Tourist trap.
Yep.
Get a couple of cheap T-shirts that
Yep.
Gildan brand that shrinks after one wash.
Yep. Order big.
Order big. No, but Chicago has kind of a bad rap. There's a lot of violence there that's reported.
Gun control.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in Chicago, and the good stuff
A lot of
rarely.
mafia.
You just keep going as I'm trying to
I do.
recover from this. I'm like, there's a lot of great stuff, mob. There's a lot of great stuff, murder capital of the United States. I'm trying to put a positive spin on this thing, Bill.
Oh, yeah, I digress. The great city, though.
High taxes.
Good pizza.
Yeah. Yeah. Finally, there's a cough. No, but there's a lot of great things that come out of Chicago, and one of them is this sweet casting pier that they have. And I think it was in 1898. They had a casting competition there on the piers on this pier in Chicago.
What were they casting for?
Well, it's a competition.
Oh, I thought it was like a program or something.
No. It's like
reality TV.
Reality TV. Yeah, it's like these people who challenge pretty girls on the internet to see if they're really outdoors women. Have you heard about that?
I have not.
Yeah, I guess these guys are challenging these girls just because you're an attractive person and you have a lot of Instagram followers. Well, you just hold a fish in a bikini and you get like 1,000 million
That's
likes.
never worked for me.
That's never worked for me either.
Never worked for me.
I've tried it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work
just
for me.
Behind closed doors.
Yeah, so this game thing, it's just to get on a podcast.
Yeah.
It got me here on a very...
Keep the fish, lose the top. Never mind.
No, but seriously though, like they're challenging these girls. Are you really outdoors people? Are you just doing this to get a following, get attention?
Yeah.
And it's like that's a really strange road to walk because, you don't ask attractive guys, are you really an outdoorsman?
Why not?
Well, I mean, I've got asked a couple times. No, but anyways, back to Chicago, it is really a great place.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of awesome museums. They've got a lot of great fishing in that area as well. I mean, our sponsor, Sandhill Coffee, is from the Chicago area. And this week's guest, Robert Tomes, actually grew up in the Chicago area.
Awesome.
And he runs a casting clinic there on this crazy pier that's been there since 1898.
That is crazy.
Yeah. And
that's tradition.
He's going to talk a lot about that. And, when I think Chicago, I don't think fly fishing.
Nor do I.
I think Good Times, JJ from Good Times. Remember that show, Good Times?
Yep.
It's Dynamite. And, I think about all this bad stuff that we're filtered. And, when you live really far away from something, we live a little closer to Chicago.
Yeah.
But I've talked a lot about my friend on the podcast, Mark Miller, who moved down to Texas from Chicago. Mm-hmm. My best friend in middle school / high school. He lived on the road from me, and he could swear.
Oh, lucky.
And his mom would smoke these big Virginia Slims. Mark! And he got the master bedroom, and his mom and dad slept in a twin room because he was the oldest son. Yeah, and he was the oldest, but they babied him. Hey, Mark, get you, and he would swear. Remember I told you the country music story?
The CDs, yeah.
Yeah, and it was such a novelty to have someone from Chicago on our street, And they were awesome people though, Yeah. And all I'd ever known of Chicago was this big city really far away. Yep. And I think a lot of times the reporting, and Robert and I talk about this on the podcast, that all the reporting is negative because that sells newspapers.
Yeah.
Well, not newspapers, but the internet.
Yep.
Gets
it sells the internet.
It sells the cloud, or what do we call it? The sky. It sells downloads out of the sky.
Yep.
God.
Let's put that in our description for this. So we'll sell some more.
Yeah.
We'll sell some more downloads from the sky.
We'll get some more downloads from the sky, and then we'll take this file and we'll store it in the sky. Mm-hmm. No, but it really is a great place, and I think it's really unfortunately it's gotten a really bad rap.
Yeah.
It's it's easy to pick on.
Yep.
But in all reality, it's a great city.
It's our Midwest redheaded stepchild.
It is. It's okay to knock on Chicago.
Yeah.
It's okay to knock on Detroit.
Yep. They can take it.
It's kind of it's okay to knock on these towns,
mm-hmm.
but don't knock on Dallas. There's some cities where it's okay to be mean to.
Yeah.
Like LA.
Yep.
Los Angeles, California. you don't hear a lot of bad stuff out of LA, but I'm sure a lot of bad stuff happened. Well, I guess the riots.
Yeah, we're going back some time.
We're going back some time.
20-some years.
Remember when OJ was driving down the road?
Yep.
Where were you when OJ was driving down the road?
I was at a relative was renting a cabin on a lake, and I remember we just got in from swimming, and we came in and gathered around the TV, and there's the slow chase.
The Bronco.
Yep, the white Bronco.
Dude, it's so funny because it's almost like 9/11. 9/11 happened. Oh, everyone gathered around the TV. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And I remember 9/11 like it was nothing. And I'm not comparing the two, but it was the same kind of thing. It was like, hold on, why is this white Bronco going down the road?
Behold a pale horse.
Exactly. Behold the pale horse. And here's OJ Simpson, like 20 cars. I was at my grandparents because I had a hip replacement, and they wanted to watch me for like a week in the summertime. And I was at their place, and we were watching it, and I was all hopped up on drugs and everything else, like pain pills and everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll never forget that. I was like, what is, everyone in the world was like, oh my gosh, OJ. But LA's got, there's some cities though, for some reason, Chicago is easily picked on. And I think unfortunately, it shouldn't be. I think it's a great city. It's a great town, great fishing scene, awesome Orvis shop there. And it's just a great place to go. Mm-hmm. And so Robert's going to talk a little about his hometown.
Nice.
Hey, you know that Planes, Trains, and Automobiles?
Yeah.
When they're in that taxi cab, and John Candy and Steve Martin are in the back seat, and Steve Martin's like, shares a long way to the hotel, and John Candy's like, he's proud of his town. He's proud of his town because he's a taxi guy, and John Candy's not paying the cab fare anyway, so he doesn't care. He's proud of his town. No, but Robert Thomas comes in. He's proud of his town. He's going to talk to us a little bit about how awesome Chicago scene is, and also muskie fishing.
That is awesome. Those are huge fish.
Fly fishing for muskie. So it's a great interview.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Well, today on the Remote No Pressure podcast, I'm very excited to have Robert Thomas with us. Thank you very much for hanging out with us, Robert.
Great to be here, Jeff. Thank you.
Now, we met actually at Trout Unlimited there in Chicago last fall, wasn't it? Or last summer?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we played some back and forth, and actually interviewed you before, but the software didn't work, and it was just not a good thing. So I really appreciate you, number one, being very patient with me and being gracious enough to come back on to the podcast. So thank you.
My pleasure, Jeff. Yeah, I always love talking fishing and love your podcast. So it's great that we're able to do this finally. So
that's awesome. Now, were you born and raised there in Chicago, Robert?
Yeah. I'm from the Chicago area. Grew up near Lake Michigan, and that's pretty much why I got into fishing, I guess, as a kid. Catching perch on the lakefront, and then salmon and trout when they started to come around. In the late 60s, early 70s, and even carp, which was a big deal to me then, and are a big deal now.
Right. Yeah, they weren't always a big deal to the masses, though. Am I right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was kind of embarrassed. I remember a really nice guy once took us as kids to the big fishing show at McCormick Place, I think it was. And Al Linder was there, and Al asked us. I remember looking up at him, and he asked us, "What kind of fish do you like to catch, boys?" And I remember saying, "Carp." And I remember the look on his face was like, "Get this kid out of here."
You're making me look bad, kid.
Because they pulled the hardest, and they were huge. It was great. We had a blast. Yeah.
Yeah, what were you fishing with them? With like corn or something, or what were you fishing for carpet back then? Yeah.
Yeah, corn and big glob of worm and it was. I remember that. That was the first big pull I ever had in my life, and it was what got me hooked. That and the fact that where I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, Orvis decided to put in one of its early retail stores, kind of an experiment before they got into the Orvis stores. And I ended up getting a job there when I was like 14 years old, and just hanging out at the store because the guy who ran it, a guy named Andy Burrows, was a wonderful man, and just wanted to kind of take me under his wing. And that's really where I got into the fly fishing thing, because I've been fishing around the lakefront. I was absorbing everything I could get my hands on about fishing, and fly fishing was something I really hadn't, delved into or understood. And then here I was hanging out at an Orvis store. So it was like Christmas every day. And I ended up working there, on and off right through, even into college. I was doing, we did the Orvis schools. I did fly tying classes, and it was just a great experience. Got to meet, a lot of the greats, even as a kid, Lefty Cray, Dave Whitlock, Doug Swisher, all the people who were really the big names back then. That was the turning point for me.
Yeah, and you spoke there of the guy there. You were 14 years old. You get this job at Orvis, and this guy's really sewed into your life and kind of brought you under his wing and taught you that, and taught you about fly fishing. And that story that's a recurring story. It seems like with everyone that I talk to, whether they're young or old or no matter their age, it's like, yeah, so-and-so took me under their wing and showed me how to fly fish. I know Orvis has like some great casting schools, and a lot of local fly shops will teach you how to cast and all this other stuff. But it seems like that intimate relationship that people have with a mentor really does make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's what I'm all about today, because that's how I got into it. And that experience working at that store, which was, a lot of people may know it, called the Trout and Grouse, which was in Wilmette, a suburb north of Chicago. That experience introduced me to a whole network of friends that remain friends today. In fact, one of the guys that I taught fly tying back when I was like 16 years old is heading down to the Kankakee with me in 2 weeks to go, well, if the water ever comes down, to try and chase some smallmouth. I mean, so we're still fishing buddies. That, that's a long relationship. But it was men who took me under their wing, really, introduced me to the whole world of fly fishing, and it's been great. And that's what I do today, is try and introduce other people to it, because we need more people who appreciate the outdoors and the sport, and that's a tough battle right now. So.
Yeah, and speaking of introducing more people to fly fishing, I mean, you run a program there, right? Teaching people how to cast. Am I right?
That's right, Jeff. Yeah, I run along with a group of volunteers, but in particular, a fellow named Jeff Goad, who's the president of the Elliott Donnelly chapter of Trout Unlimited here in Chicago, who you spoke to when we met. Jeff and I put together a program 8 years ago, I guess it was, at the Peggy Nodebart Nature Museum, which is this spectacular nature museum in Lincoln Park on the North Pond. And the purpose of it was to utilize a concrete pier that sits on North Pond that actually happens to be the original casting pier of Chicago, for Chicago. And its legacy dates back to the Columbian Exposition in 1893, where the world's first international casting competition was held. And it's just one of these little hidden gems in the city of Chicago that every day we teach out there, people come by and say, hey, we didn't know that was there, or we didn't know that. And it's been an amazing program, Jeff. We've, it's grown over the years, of course, but now it's kind of at its full capacity. I've got a group of 10 to 12 regular volunteers that help us. We teach every Wednesday from May through October for a couple hours in the middle of the day, simply because it's a popular venue, so we can't be out there all the time. For other people casting, and also for people just enjoying the park. But we teach well over 1,000 kids a year, both spin casting. We start them with simple gear, and then if we see the skills are there, then we move them on to fly casting. And it's not all kids, of course. It's young adults, teenagers, and adults. And there's been a lot of good press about it. Orvis ran some good stuff on it. There's a video about it. We have a website, northpondcastingpier.com. We have an Instagram account and a Facebook page, and that's all drawn more attention to it. But it's a great thing to do in the city, particularly for all the young people that don't appreciate that there's this kind of opportunity to learn right in the city. And the museum backs us, 100% on this. It's been a big draw for them. And we even have been able to benefit from a program that some of the big retail outlets like Bass Pro are involved in, where they do a rod exchange for new gear, and then they provide us with gear, much of which is really good stuff, which we then give to kids for free, kids that are in need of fishing gear. So it's a win. It's like a triple win. It's amazing. And right now this year, it's kind of crazy. I mean, we're averaging like 50 to 100 kids a day on that pier, teaching them about casting.
Oh my gosh.
It's been great. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's taken off. Yeah.
So this competition that was held there in 1893, it was a fly casting competition then?
There was both. Yeah. There was both whatever the rudimentary bait casting technique was then, as well as fly casting. In fact, if you go on our website, there's a wonderful history written by one of our volunteers, Jim Dorr, of that history, and it includes some incredible pencil drawings from the time that show how they had that casting pier set up, and people engaging in the competition for the Columbian Exposition. And a little interesting side note, but there was a memorial built. There was a good friend of Isaac Walton, the guy named Charles Cotton, and he built a memorial to Isaac on I believe it was the Itchen, but I could be wrong, another river, another of the spring creeks in England. And they reproduced that very memorial at the Columbian Exposition at the casting pond when they did this. So the casting that took place at the exposition was down in Jackson Park, which is where the Field Museum is today. The Museum of Science and Industry. And then the casting pier that exists today is about 70 years old, that exists in North Pond. Thanks to a generous donation of concrete from the Crown family. So it's just your basic, casting pier with 4 quadrants, and we put rings in for casting targets and distance, and we maintain it, we clean it. We have a rod rack there, and we have equipment there, and it's really, it couldn't be, a better facility for doing this in the city.
Yeah, that's great. I grew up in Texas. I think you knew that, Robert. And I remember when I was last year middle school and into high school, I had a friend whose dad worked for the Super Walmart, and we just put a new one in town. And they moved down there from Chicago, and I remember their accents and everything, because in Texas, everyone's got a real thick accent and everything, And I remember these people come down from Chicago, and Chicago, to me, growing up in Texas, even though I was in the Houston area and I was used to a big city, Chicago was just a different place. It was so far away, and it was so exotic, and
it's like another country. Yeah.
It is, and I think a lot of times people outside of Chicago, they hear about all the shootings that are going on there, all the violence and all the negativity around Chicago. They don't think, that could be a great place there's a lot of fly fishing history there, or places to fly fish. So it's really good to hear some positive things coming out of such a great city.
Yeah, excellent point, Jeff. Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a lifelong resident here, and I deal with that, same attitude all the time. And, there are some very scary and troubling things about Chicago, but there's also some incredibly great things, most of which emanate around the lake and what it provides, and in addition to the culture and, theater and everything. I mean, it's an amazing urban environment. It's just, obviously that doesn't sell news, so
it doesn't get clicks on the internet. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's a positive for the city for sure, and it's been recognized as such, and it's getting more and more popular.
Yeah, it's a great city. When I came there last year when we met, I really, because I've been living in this cornfield literally for like since 2002 pretty much. And I drive into the city every once in a while, and I felt like such a hayseed, trying to like how to park and all that other stuff. Wasn't used to such a big city, but man, what a great place! It was just a lot of life and energy. It was really cool.
Yeah, if you kind of go, if you don't try and fight it too hard and chill out a little, it's okay. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you're not going to beat it. You got to go with the flow. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about Muskie on the Fly. Thank you guys so much for listening. This part of our podcast is brought to you by our sponsors, Deli Fresh Design, and also
Sandhill Coffee.
Thank you, Bill.
Mm-hmm. Pregnant pause.
Pregnant pause. See, I was waiting for you, Bill.
I was right there.
You were there.
I got your six.
That's why you're here, dude. No, but Sandhill Coffee makes great coffee. And as a matter of fact, speaking of our writing competition, short story competition, they are both donating a few gifts to our listeners.
Oh, very nice. Keep it a secret. Keep it a secret.
Sandhill Coffee. If you go to their website at sandhillcoffee.com and type in outside 19, then you will get 20% off your first order.
Hey, that's not bad. That's like free shipping and then some.
It's free shipping and then some. Also, they have their subscription service available. So if you know how much you're drinking, you can get a pound of coffee or whatever, 12 ounces, whatever they do, on a regular basis.
That's the way to do it. You don't have to worry about it.
Don't even have to think about it.
So just go to the mailbox and
there's my new blend.
Yeah.
So go to sandhillcoffee.com, type in RNP20.
Nope.
Oh.
Outside 19.
Outside 19 and get 20% off your first order.
Correct.
RNP20 is for our sponsor with
Deli Fresh Design.
DeliFreshDesign.com makes awesome fly fishing gear out of repurposed materials, and it's also very what is the word I'm looking for, Bill?
Super.
That, and also responsible. Responsible.
Oh, I was close.
Responsible. So yeah. So be sure to go check out DeliFreshDesign.com. Type in RNP20.
Correct.
At checkout, and you receive a 20% off your order with.
And like we said, if you spend $1,000, that's like getting $200 back.
You can't afford not.
You have to. It just makes sense.
Yes, buy 8 sling packs, get 2 free. No, but yeah, 20% off is very generous.
It is.
So thank you very much, Ross. And so let's get back to the podcast. I wanted to talk a little bit about Muskie on the Fly. Now, that's kind of like your target species. How did you get into fishing for muskie?
Well, it is my target species. I guess I at this point I don't really like to be pigeonholed for that because I've really spent a lot of time fishing. Not that I don't love muskie. I just I fish all over the world for all kinds of species. But the muskie thing came about in a very unpredictable and kind of fun way, wherein I grew up in the Midwest, and when I would make trips north with my dad, who was not a fisherman, surprisingly, but who really encouraged it when he saw I was, obsessed at an early age, which, as I say in my book, was a lot better than a lot of the other things kids could get into.
Sure.
And we'd make trips up to northern Wisconsin and settled in that Boulder Junction area at one point. And, of course, anytime you get north of Madison, muskie are the target species. I mean, that's the big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately for me, at that time, muskies, the population was challenged quite a bit. There weren't a lot of good, regs to protect the fish. The length limits for a kept fish were very low. I think they might have been 30 or 32 inches at that time.
Mm.
And there were no protected trophy fisheries. So it was really hard to catch them. But everybody wanted to. So we started making those treks up there, and I got a chance to fish for muskies. And the first day I went out as a kid, and this is not fly fishing, of course. This is with the traditional bait casting gear and the ubiquitous, famous Mepps muskie killer or giant killer, one of those spinners. And I caught a really nice muskie. And that was incredible because, catching a fish like that in fresh water, was kind of like, a saltwater experience, right? I mean, it's a huge fish and it's violent. The take's violent. It's got big teeth, they're scary. And that was great. And then I really got into fly fishing, at that time and kind of put two and two together and decided I would definitely try and catch a muskie on the fly. And I dedicated a lot of time to that and started catching a lot of them. And basically, and I firmly believe this, and this is what I try and teach as well, is, those skills that you learn from all different kinds of fishing, whether you're bait fishing with a Lindy rig or you're Texas rig fishing for bass, or you're, topwater fishing with a hula pop or whatever. All of those skills, if you have those skills, you will be a much better fly fisherman, if you want to choose to pursue that. And the problem I see in a lot of fly fishing, just to kind of go to the 30,000 foot level here, is that, a lot of people in the fly fishing world try and make it much more difficult and less accessible than it is. Right. And it's a problem for the sport. And maybe, I guess there's certainly an argument that, there's already too many people fishing too little water. But, for me, it's the more people are interested in the sport, the more fish that are going to be protected and, or the more, resources that will be protected. And the really good fly fishing people that I know, have those skills from other kinds of fishing. So I took the skills I knew from muskie fishing in the traditional way, and I applied them to fly fishing. And I tied a lot of flies, and there wasn't the kind of equipment that there is today that's actually muskie specific equipment, whether it's terminal tackle or rods or whatever for fly fishing. This was kind of the early days. And Jeff, I wasn't, and I've said this, many times in many seminars and many stories that I've written, I'm not the first guy to do this. There were a lot of people doing this, or there were some people doing it. But what I did with my book, when I wrote it, was try to pull together all the available resources to give people a guide, to legitimize it and give them a resource, that they could then use to develop whatever other techniques they want to develop. I wrote a book on it, but, muskie, if you claiming to be an expert on muskies is a real dangerous thing. I mean, which is why muskie guides are, in high esteem in my mind, wherever they are, because it's such a difficult fish. I mean, they're so moody and unpredictable, and they just, they can really, make your life, hell, or they can, it's that whole 0 to hero concept, right?
Right.
Catch one good one and it makes your day. But the book happened, Jeff, because I've been doing this for a while and I've been doing some writing, some freelance stuff. And a publisher on the West Coast who was doing a series called Masters on the Fly, which published a number of really great books. Andy Mill's book on tarpon, Deck Hogan's book on steelhead. They came to me and said, "Hey, Robert, we know about what you're doing. We'd like you to do a book on muskie. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like that's a dream come true for a writer, right? Like no one does that. But they did. And they put a bunch of money into it, and they created a beautiful book. And that's a while. I mean, that was in '08. And we had very little research on whether the thing would sell and if anyone would care. You know, we knew what was going on in the traditional muskie world, but we didn't really know. There was nothing on the fly fishing end. And it slowly but surely started to take off, and then bang, it just went nuts. And now, of course, as you probably noticed, as I know, because I write for all the magazines and a lot of the stuff on the internet, you can barely get through a couple months without some story about musky fly fishing, right?
Right.
And it's a really popular species, and for good reason. It's an absolute riot on a fly. And it's accessible, here in the Midwest and actually in a lot of places throughout the country.
But you argue that it's easier. It might be easier to toss flies at these things than it is to throw plugs at them. You think that?
I don't know if I would say that, Jeff. What I would say is what happened when people started throwing flies, and what I experienced when I started throwing flies, is I was doing a presentation that they had never seen before.
Right.
I was doing a much slower presentation. I was using something that was, either natural or synthetic materials that was being manipulated in such a way that the fish would eat it in ways that the traditional guys had never seen before. Until, I guess, perhaps the advent of plastics. They use a lot of plastics now in the traditional world. These big lures called bulldogs and others, and those they will fish slowly. But the fly, just in certain situations, especially in that shallow water, top water to 10, 12 feet down, it can be killer. I mean, you can just really turn those fish on, and especially, fish that may, not want to, move on, some huge piece of, balsa wood or whatever it is they're throwing, with big blades, so it's a more subtle presentation, but there's all these trade-offs, Jeff, because muskies are particularly susceptible to speed as a trigger. So even if they have no thought about eating on a given day, could care less about what's going on, if something goes spinning over their head at 4 miles an hour, they're going to crush it. They can't help themselves. And you can't do that with a fly, right? I mean, unless you troll it, but that's not fly fishing.
Right.
And another thing they're really attracted to in certain situations is noise. And that's why I've caught all my biggest fish, or most of my biggest fish. I'm talking about over 50-inch muskies on a fly with topwater poppers. And we're talking about trevally size, poppers, ones that are big noise makers. But there's another trade-off there with topwater and muskies, which is that the topwater hit with a muskie fly is a very, very unpredictable and difficult thing in terms of a hook set, because when the fish blasts it, the light popper, which has to be light in order to fly cast, often doesn't stay in one place. It just goes flying, out of their mouth or somewhere else, right? Depends on how they hit it. When they fish topwater for muskies with the traditional musky topwater lures, like a topper stopper, or there's a whole bunch of different ones. Those are heavy, and when the fish hits it, I mean, it stays there. It goes into their mouth.
Sure.
So there's a challenge there. So my hookups on topwater are like 50-50 or less even. Streamers, on the other hand, bait fish profile streamers, much higher percentages. I mean, because they crush it, and you can, if you know how to strip strike, you're gonna get the fish.
Wow.
But it's interesting. So I don't long answer to that question, but the fly is spectacularly effective in certain situations. But it's a lot of work. I mean, it's great fishing in rivers, of course, and big rivers and small rivers, simply because it's like fishing for brown. It's like chucking streamers for browns in a river. The fish are in ambush points. You can read the water and get them. Lakes, on the other hand, I mean, you got to cover a lot of water. That's hard work. Not everybody can do that. I mean, I do it. I do it in Canada. I've done it, on all the big musky fisheries throughout Canada. And, it's, there are times you're out there and you're like, what the hell am I doing? This is nuts. I mean, you're like on this vast, we're on a weed bed even in Lake St. Clair or in the St. Lawrence, you're out there and there's, tankers going by and you're in 20 feet of water with a weed bed but there's huge fish. So that's why you do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've seen some of your pictures and stuff. You've caught some, they're almost prehistoric looking,
They are very reptilian, prehistoric, scary. I'm pretty sure I told the story in the book or in some article, but more than once I've taken people out for muskie that, had the basic skill set for casting that could do it, and explain to them how it's going to be a visual thing, and they're going to often see the fish follow, and it might come to the boat, and that we need to capitalize on that because they often eat at the boat because they're not scared at all. Once they focus in, they're like a pit bull. They're going to destroy that thing if they want it. And more than once I've had people with a fish that followed to the boat and they start backing up in the boat because they're afraid that the fish is going to eat their fly.
Yeah.
They're just scared. Yeah. Because it's scary. I mean, when they just rise up and, it's like, and then sometimes people get lucky and that happens too. And they just crush it and they're hooked up.
Yeah. Now you mentioned you were using a different pattern or different types of materials. I was at an event. We were doing a backcountry hunters and anglers event a couple months back here in Rockford, Michigan, and we had one of the owners of a fly shop come out and talk, and he was talking about using flies that may be native to, say, Oregon or somewhere, some other location here, using those in the Midwest just to change up the different patterns. So you may use a steelhead pattern from out west versus something that may be really popular here in the Midwest, just to change it up. And what do you feel about that? Do you think that there's a lot of truth to that?
Anything is in fly fishing. Anything's possible. I mean, I'm always all ears and no talk when I'm dealing with someone who knows their shit from some other place. Sure. I mean, my first rule is always listen to your guide or listen to the local information.
Right.
If you're talking about steelhead, I mean, there's always been a lot of interesting back and forth between the West Coast steelheading and the Midwest, and I do both a lot. And from British Columbia to Oregon to Washington to Michigan to Wisconsin to, in all the major steelhead fisheries. And I would say that the river types are so different from east to west that the fish stage differently and they eat differently. So, for instance, a great example would be, swinging flies in the Muskegon. That's a totally swingable river. Those fish set up and you can swing there and you can do it with spay and it's very cool. And I've been doing it a long time. But, swinging on smaller bodies of water, it's doable, of course. But is it, consistently practical when you would probably be better off, dropping flies in front of a fish, at a much faster rate, whether it's a nymph or an egg fly or whatever, because they're in pockets and they're in holes and they're, tucked into the bank. So those flies that we have developed in the Midwest are for that purpose. And I have likewise, though, used some of those techniques in the West before, and they certainly work. But I don't know. I mean, it's just, the big rivers of BC and stuff. I mean, you can swing them. And also, that's why you can have much more consistent dry fly activity on those West Coast streams, because those fish stage up more like, Atlantic salmon almost. And and they'll follow a swung fly on the surface and bang it. It happens in the Midwest, of course, but it's, you need much more. You need much broader swing range to be able to do that. Unless they happen to be just focused in on a hatch of some sort, which happens. I know.
Yeah.
I mean, steelhead will do that, but I don't know. I don't know if that answers that question or not. But
yeah,
if it relates to muskie, I don't know. There's so many. Here's the cool thing about muskies. I am totally a presentation guy. I think if you can get some reasonable facsimile of some forage that a muskie wants to eat in front of its face, it's going to chew it. You just gotta manipulate. You gotta be a puppeteer. You gotta be able to fish it properly. And but on the other hand, you can just have so much fun with the patterns because there's the palette is just so broad and there's so many different materials. But every fish that you get a response from should teach you something. That's the key thing with muskies. And on a given day, if I'm out there fishing for muskies all day and I don't get a move like from a smallmouth, I'm wondering like, what the heck is going on here? Like, like no muskies, no smallmouth, something's going on here.
Right.
But if I start to get follows or swings or whatever from a fish, but they don't crush it, then I know right away I'm going to change out, because they should annihilate it.
Right.
If they get the opportunity, they should annihilate it.
That's awesome.
And it's fun, but it's also hard because you get your ass handed to you a lot. So,
yeah, I'm sure.
Which is why we do it.
Yeah. It's that smart aleck dad joke. That's why it's called fishing, not catching.
Exactly.
I've heard it so many times. It's true, though.
There is a chapter in my book about, the mental stamina required. And when I wrote it, I thought this is a little crazy. Like, this is a little, too out there. But it's actually, like, the most important thing because they'll beat you up, you're like, what am I doing? Why am I casting? Why am I enduring this pain for this fish? And they kind of know that. That's the weird thing about them. They're diabolical. They know and they sense, and then they eat when you're just about giving up.
That's
well,
awesome.
Not diabolical. I should say evil. Most people would agree with that.
Well, cool. Well, we'll post some links up to your book.
I appreciate that. It's right now. I mean, it sold very, very well for a long time. Right now, there's copies out there on Amazon and other places and other bookstores around the country. We're working on a second edition with a few tweaks on it. But I don't have a date for that, and I'm not going to promise anything. But it's sold very, very well. It was a real, it's very satisfying. More satisfying than that is just to hear from people who were inspired by it. And, it wasn't, as I've always said, this is not a retirement plan. It's a labor of love. I did it because I want people to appreciate it, and it's worked,
Right.
People are really into it. And I am not only because of me, because there are a lot of other people who are, into it, and guides, and there's videos, there's all kinds of great stuff out there now. So it's wonderful.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And there's so much accessibility to information now, and like when you talked about growing up in the 60s and 70s and learning from the guy there in downtown Chicago, now we have YouTube and we have accessible so much information now, and it's really a cool time to experience fly fishing because
absolutely,
you really do have at the fingertips. I mean, even like when I was a kid, I tell my boys I didn't have a computer in my home till I was a senior in high school, and it wasn't connected to the internet, And if we wanted to find out about fly fishing, I had to go down to the library to the card catalog and find out and then go find the book. And in Texas, we didn't have a whole down there, especially we didn't have a whole lot of books on fly fishing. I mean, they've got a big growing population of fly anglers now, but growing up, I never saw that. I mean, people in Montana or something, and not in Houston in the refineries, it was not something that was, but now it's it's just really cool to see that explosion of knowledge and just the accessibility that we have to the sport, which a lot of people didn't have before. And, you spoke earlier about, it's not that difficult. And I think a lot, it's not that much more difficult than, say, fishing or, it just takes a little more finesse and you can learn it. It's not some impossible thing. And it's so crazy because I talk to so many people, oh, Jeff, you're the fly fishing guy. And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, come on, let's go fishing. I'll take you fishing. They're like, oh, no, I couldn't do that. That looks just so hard and complicated. And it's like, it's not, it's amazing because I'm pretty ADD and I don't know if we call it ADD. I've never been diagnosed or anything, but I like to move. I don't like to stand still. And so for me, going fly fishing, especially wading in a river, I'm constantly moving up and down the river. My arms are constantly moving. I'm constantly looking over the river, seeing where the fish are. It's just a lot more active than I think people know, So,
oh yeah. That's we both share that same experience with people when they, when you tell them you fish or you fly fish or whatever, what they're hearing is a far different thing than you experience yourself. And in many cases, they're envisioning sitting in a boat with a bobber, right? Or they're envisioning the most boring thing on earth, like watching paint dry, wherein for us, it's like this totally engaging, active thing where we're covering miles of water and not thinking about anything else, which is, one of the great things about fly fishing. And certainly for people who are focused on it, it's the best, it's the best therapy. It's the best religion there is. It's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I keep doing it. That's why if I ever, I've always said this and my friends know this, my wife certainly knows this, but I mean, if I ever don't get excited about going fishing, even though I fish all the time, then it's over, something's wrong. Put me down because, I am always thrilled to go fishing and I'm nearly 60 years old.
Wow.
And I fish my ass off all the time.
So. Well, that's awesome. Well, you'll have to come up and fish with me sometime. I mean,
I'd love to.
If you fish the Muskegon or the Rogue, Rogue is not very far from me at all. So
I love the Rogue. I did hit the drakes on there one time. You mentioned that earlier. I hit that years ago. And it was really a good hatch. I mean, the fish were on it. It was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I really appreciate you spending some time with us, Robert.
Sure.
And we'll put some links up to your website and to your book, and also
I appreciate
to the website for the museum as well. And people will reach out to you. Do you have any social stuff, social media? Where could people reach out to you, Robert, if they wanted to?
I'm not a big social media guy. I guess I'm just I'm kind of like pre-internet. Learn to fish, learn to cast, and and then through that, I have certainly utilized it with our casting program at the Nature Museum. But in terms of there's a very old, in need of updating website for my book. My publisher, Wild River Press, has a website with some stuff on it. But I'm just not, I do seminars and I do a lot of writing. I've got a lot of stuff coming out in the next couple of months here, about fly fishing for various species and different experiences. But, I don't know. That doesn't really answer your question either. But
well, when you get that stuff too, when your new stuff comes out, be sure to let us know, and we'll share that as well with our congregation here at the Fly Fishing Religion.
That's good.
So, well, great. Well, thanks.
Amen.
Hallelujah. Well, hey, Robert. Thanks a lot, and thank you for your time.
And thank you, Jeff.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Thanks, Bill, for hanging out today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Speaking of hanging out, this has nothing to do with hanging out.
Good.
So it's not really like a transition.
Oh. What is it? Do tell.
It has to do with our short story competition.
Yes.
So we announced it last week, and we got
actually
a few
2 weeks
emails.
ago. 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2-3 weeks ago. And we're actually going to announce our winners here. That first, we have a few changes going on, but the first episode in August, it looks like. We're going to announce our winners.
Awesome.
And we have prizes. So
excellent.
Not only that, but the writers will be interviewed on the podcast. We'll put you out on the on all of our social media as well. So you'll get a lot of traffic that way.
Yeah, that's going to be great.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm looking forward to reading some of those.
Yeah, tell us about our YouTube channel, Bill.
We have a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
All of our old episodes from the very beginning of Remote No Pressure on are posted.
Okay.
And every week when we post on Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m., they are posted again for Sunday. So that means go ahead and check them out there as well. Subscribe, share them on your Facebook if you like. If they're, if you've had fun and you enjoy us, yeah,
that's awesome. Be sure also if you could leave us a review, that would be great.
Yeah.
That always helps out. And so check us out on all of our social platforms. Be sure to sign up for our email list. And we just thank you guys so much. And until next time, go fishing.